My name is Detective Sarah Rodriguez, and in my 15 years with the Los Angeles Police Department's Major Crimes Division, I've seen criminals make some incredibly stupid mistakes. But nothing prepared me for the case of Marcus Thompson, better known in the rap world as Money Mike, a rising star who literally confessed to a $1.2 million bank robbery through his own lyrics, then posted the evidence on social media for millions to see. The story begins in the summer of 2019, when Marcus Thompson was just another struggling rapper from Compton trying to make it in an industry that chews up and spits out thousands of hopeful artists every year. At 24 years old, Marcus had been grinding for 6 years, performing at small venues, uploading tracks to SoundCloud, and working part-time jobs to pay rent on a cramped apartment he shared with 2 roommates. Marcus wasn't without talent. His flow was smooth, his wordplay was clever, and he had a natural charisma that connected with audiences. But talent alone doesn't guarantee success in the music industry, and Marcus was growing increasingly frustrated with his lack of progress. While other rappers his age were signing record deals and buying luxury cars, he was still taking the bus to his job at an electronics store in downtown LA. The pressure was getting to him. His girlfriend, Keisha, was pregnant with their first child, and the reality of impending fatherhood made his financial struggles feel even more urgent. Marcus had always prided himself on being able to provide for the people he loved, but minimum wage paychecks weren't going to cut it when he had a family to support. It was during this period of desperation that Marcus began hanging around with Tony T-Money Williams, a local hustler who claimed to have connections in the music industry. Tony was everything Marcus wanted to be: flashy, confident, and seemingly wealthy. He drove a Mercedes, wore expensive jewelry, and always had a thick roll of cash in his pocket. "You got talent, Mike," Tony would tell him during their late-night conversations at various clubs and bars around LA. "But talent ain't enough in this game. You need capital to invest in yourself, studio time, music videos, promotion." The artists making it big, they all had money behind them from the start. Tony's words resonated with Marcus because they contained just enough truth to be convincing. The music industry did require significant financial investment, and many successful artists had indeed come from privileged backgrounds or had financial backing that allowed them to focus on their craft without worrying about basic survival. What Marcus didn't know was that Tony's wealth didn't come from music industry connections or legitimate business ventures. Tony Williams was a career criminal who specialized in bank robberies, and he had been carefully studying Marcus for months, looking for the perfect partner for his next job. The plan Tony eventually proposed was elegant in its simplicity. The First National Bank of Beverly Hills processed massive cash deposits every Friday from high-end retail stores and restaurants in the area. Tony had been watching the bank for weeks, noting the security procedures, timing the guard rotations, and identifying the optimal window for a robbery. "It's not like the movies," Tony explained to Marcus during a meeting at a 24-hour diner in East LA. "We're not going in with guns blazing and ski masks. This is going to be clean, professional, and foolproof." Tony's plan involved sophisticated preparation that demonstrated his experience in this type of crime. He had acquired detailed floor plans of the bank through a contact who worked for the building's maintenance company. He had studied the schedules of all the employees and identified the day manager, Patricia Hendricks, who had access to the main vault. The robbery would take place on a Friday afternoon, just before closing time, when the bank would have the maximum amount of cash on hand but the minimum number of customers and staff. Tony had even planned their escape route, identifying 3 different paths from the bank to a safe house where they could lay low until the heat died down. "Here's the beautiful part," Tony told Marcus, spreading out hand-drawn maps and photographs on the diner table. "The bank's security system has a blind spot near the employee entrance. We go in through there, control the situation for exactly 7 minutes, and we're out with enough money to change our lives forever." Marcus listened to the plan with a mixture of fascination and terror. Everything Tony was describing sounded like something out of a heist movie, but the level of detail and preparation made it seem almost reasonable. "How much are we talking about?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Conservative estimate? 800,000 to 1.2 million, depending on how much cash they have on hand that day." The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. More money than he had ever imagined having, enough to provide for Keisha and their baby, enough to fund his music career properly, enough to escape the cycle of poverty that had defined his entire life. "What's my cut?" he asked, already knowing he was going to say yes. 50-50 split, Tony replied. "But you need to understand something, Mike. Once we do this, there's no going back. This isn't some petty theft we're talking about. This is federal crime territory, and if we get caught, we're looking at serious prison time." Marcus thought about Keisha, about their unborn child, about the cramped apartment and the dead-end job and the music career that seemed to be going nowhere despite years of effort. "I'm in," he said. Over the next 6 weeks, Tony trained Marcus in every aspect of the robbery. They practiced the timing until Marcus could perform his role with military precision. They studied photographs of the bank employees until Marcus could identify each person by name. They rehearsed their cover story. They would pose as representatives from a security company conducting a surprise audit of the bank's procedures. Tony had even acquired authentic-looking credentials and uniforms that would allow them to enter the bank without raising suspicion. The attention to detail was remarkable, and Marcus began to understand why Tony had been successful in his criminal career for so many years without getting caught. "The key to a successful robbery," Tony explained, "is making sure it doesn't look like a robbery until it's too late for anyone to stop you." On the morning of the robbery, Marcus woke up with a mixture of excitement and terror that made him feel like he might vomit. This was it, the moment that would either make him rich or destroy his life completely. Tony picked him up at 10 a.m. in a stolen Honda Civic that looked completely unremarkable. They drove to the safe house, a rented storage unit where Tony had stashed their equipment and uniforms. "You ready for this?" Tony asked as they changed into their security company uniforms. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, though his hands were shaking as he adjusted his fake badge. They arrived at the First National Bank of Beverly Hills at exactly 2:47 p.m., just as Tony had planned. The bank was moderately busy, with about a dozen customers conducting various transactions. Marcus and Tony walked through the front entrance with the confidence of men who belonged there, their fake credentials prominently displayed. "Excuse me," Tony said to the first teller they encountered, "We're from Apex Security Solutions. We're here to conduct a surprise audit of your security procedures." The teller, a young woman named Jennifer, looked confused but not suspicious. "I wasn't told about any audit," she said. "That's the point of a surprise audit," Marcus said, following the script they had rehearsed. "We need to speak with your manager immediately." Within minutes, they were face to face with Patricia Hendricks, the day manager who had access to the vault. Tony's research had been perfect. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what Tony had predicted she would be doing. "Ms. Hendricks," Tony said, showing her his fake credentials, "we need to conduct an immediate security assessment of your vault procedures. This will only take a few minutes, but we need your full cooperation." Patricia looked uncertain, but the official-looking badges and Tony's authoritative manner convinced her to comply. "Of course," she said. "What do you need me to do?" "We need you to open the vault and walk us through your standard procedures," Marcus said, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone in the bank could hear it. As Patricia led them toward the vault, Marcus couldn't believe how smoothly everything was going. Tony's plan was working perfectly, and in just a few minutes, they would be walking out of the bank with more money than Marcus had ever dreamed of having. But as they approached the vault, Marcus had no idea that this moment would mark the beginning of the end for both of them. The crime that seemed so perfectly planned was about to unravel in ways that neither Marcus nor Tony could have anticipated, and the evidence that would ultimately convict them would come from the most unexpected source imaginable. The robbery was about to succeed beyond their wildest dreams, but Marcus Thompson's ego and his need to brag about his success would soon turn their perfect crime into a prosecutor's dream case. As Patricia Hendricks led us toward the vault, I could see the exact moment when Tony Williams made the transition from con man to armed robber. His demeanor shifted subtly but unmistakably. The friendly security consultant disappeared, replaced by someone who was clearly in complete control of the situation. "Miss Hendricks," Tony said quietly as they reached the vault door, "I need you to understand that this is no longer a security audit. This is a robbery, and if you cooperate fully, nobody will get hurt." Patricia's face went white with terror, but to her credit, she didn't scream or try to run. Tony had chosen his target well. She was a professional who understood that her primary responsibility was to protect the safety of her employees and customers. "Please," she whispered, "don't hurt anyone. Nobody's going to get hurt if everyone follows instructions," Marcus said, surprised by how calm his own voice sounded. The adrenaline was incredible. He felt like he was floating outside his own body, watching someone else commit this crime. Tony had timed everything perfectly. It was 2:52 p.m., exactly when he had predicted the bank would have maximum cash on hand with minimum security presence. The armed guard was on his scheduled break, and most of the tellers were busy with the afternoon rush of customers. "Open the vault," Tony instructed Patricia. "Move slowly and don't do anything that might trigger an alarm." Patricia's hands were shaking as she entered the combination, but she managed to open the massive steel door that protected the bank's cash reserves. What they saw inside exceeded even Tony's optimistic projections. The vault contained stacks of cash that seemed to go on forever. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in neat bundles, organized by denomination and secured with bank straps. Marcus had never seen so much money in one place, and for a moment, he was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of what they were stealing. "Start loading," Tony said, handing Marcus a large duffel bag. "We have exactly 4 minutes before the guard returns from his break." They worked with mechanical efficiency, stuffing bundle after bundle of cash into their bags. $20 bills, $50 bills, hundreds, more money than Marcus had earned in his entire life, disappearing into their duffel bags in a matter of minutes. "How much do you think we got?" Marcus whispered as they zipped up the bags. "At least $1 million, Tony replied. "Maybe more." As they prepared to leave, Tony turned to Patricia with instructions that demonstrated his experience in this type of crime. "Ms. Hendricks, you're going to wait exactly 10 minutes before you call the police. If you call sooner, we'll know, and we'll come back. Do you understand?" Patricia nodded, tears streaming down her face. 10 minutes, Tony repeated. "Count them out loud if you have to." They walked out of the bank with the same calm confidence they had displayed when entering. To the customers and remaining staff, they looked like security consultants who had completed their audit and were leaving to file their report. The stolen Honda Civic was parked exactly where they had left it, and within minutes, they were driving away from the scene of the crime with $1.2 million in cash sitting in the back seat. "We did it," Marcus said, unable to believe what had just happened. "We actually did it." "Phase 1 is complete," Tony said, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "Now comes the hard part, not getting caught." They drove to the Safe House, a rented storage unit in an industrial area of downtown LA where Tony had prepared everything they would need for the aftermath of the robbery. Clean clothes, a different car, and most importantly, a plan for laundering the money over time. "The key now," Tony explained as they counted their take, "is to act completely normal. Don't change your lifestyle, don't make any big purchases, and for God's sake, don't tell anyone what we did." The final count was $1.247 million, more than either of them had dared to hope for. Marcus's share was $623,500, enough money to transform his life completely. "This stays between us," Tony said as they divided the cash. "Nobody else can ever know about this. Not your girlfriend, not your family, not your friends. The moment you tell someone, we're both going to prison." Marcus nodded, but even as he agreed to Tony's conditions, he was already thinking about how incredible this story would be. He had just pulled off one of the biggest bank robberies in LA history, and the rapper in him was already composing lyrics about the experience. Over the next few weeks, Marcus tried to follow Tony's advice about maintaining a normal lifestyle. But the money was burning a hole in his pocket. He started making small purchases, new clothes, better studio equipment, dinners at expensive restaurants. Nothing too flashy, but enough to improve his quality of life significantly. More importantly, the success of the robbery had given Marcus a confidence boost that translated directly into his music. He felt like a real gangster now, not just someone rapping about a lifestyle he had never actually lived. His lyrics became more authentic, more detailed, more compelling. The first song Marcus wrote after the robbery was called "Perfect Score," and it was unlike anything he had ever created before. The verses were filled with specific details about planning and executing a major crime, delivered with the confidence of someone who had actually done what he was rapping about. Studied the layout for weeks, every camera, every door timing was perfect, walked out with so much more security, thought we were legit, badges looking clean, biggest payday of my life, know what I mean? Marcus was so proud of the song that he couldn't resist sharing it with other rappers in his circle. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Everyone agreed that "Perfect Score" was his best work yet, with a level of authenticity that set it apart from typical rap braggadocio. "Yo, Mike," said his friend Deshaun after hearing the track, "this is some next level stuff. You sound like you really lived this." "Sometimes you gotta draw from real experience," Marcus replied with a knowing smile. The positive feedback convinced Marcus to record a professional version of "Perfect Score" at a high-end studio in Hollywood. He spent $3,000 of his robbery money on production costs, working with a producer who specialized in the kind of hard-hitting beats that complemented Marcus's new confident delivery. The finished version of "Perfect Score" was everything Marcus had hoped for and more. His flow was flawless, the production was crisp and professional, and the lyrics painted a vivid picture of a successful heist that had every detail except the specific location and date. Marcus uploaded the song to all the major streaming platforms and promoted it heavily on his social media accounts. Within days, "Perfect Score" was getting thousands of plays and hundreds of comments from fans who were impressed by the apparent authenticity of Marcus's criminal narrative. "This is fire, Money Mike. You really living this life. Best track you ever dropped, bro, sounds so real." When you dropping the album? This is straight heat. The success of Perfect Score led to Marcus's first real breakthrough in the music industry. A talent scout from a mid-level record label reached out about a potential deal, and Marcus suddenly found himself in meetings with industry executives who were interested in signing him. "We love the authenticity," said Rebecca Martinez, an A&R representative from Apex Records. "There's something about your delivery that makes us believe you've actually lived these experiences." Marcus was flying high, convinced that his criminal success had finally given him the credibility he needed to make it in the rap game. He started working on a full album, with Perfect Score as the lead single, and began planning music videos that would showcase his newfound confidence and success, but Marcus had made a fatal error that would soon bring his world crashing down. In his excitement about his musical breakthrough, he had forgotten Tony's most important rule: never tell anyone about the robbery. While Marcus hadn't explicitly confessed to the crime, his lyrics contained enough specific details to catch the attention of someone who was very familiar with the First National Bank robbery, Detective Sarah Rodriguez of the LAPD Major Crimes Division. "I had been assigned to the case 3 days after the robbery, and I had spent weeks studying every detail of the crime. The professionalism of the execution, the inside knowledge of the bank's procedures, the sophisticated planning, everything suggested that this was the work of experienced criminals, not amateurs." But when a fellow detective who was into hip-hop music played Perfect Score for me during a coffee break, I immediately recognized details that were far too specific to be coincidental. The song described a bank robbery that matched our case in dozens of specific ways: the timing, the method of entry, the use of fake security credentials, even the approximate amount stolen. Either Marcus Thompson was an incredibly lucky guesser, or he had intimate knowledge of a crime that only 3 people in the world knew the details of: the 2 robbers and Detective Sarah Rodriguez. Marcus Thompson had just confessed to a $1.20 million bank robbery in a rap song, and he had posted the evidence on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube for the entire world to hear. The investigation that would bring down Marcus and Tony was about to begin, and the evidence that would convict them was already going viral on social media. The moment I heard Perfect Score playing in the break room, I knew I was listening to a confession. As the lead detective on the First National Bank robbery case, I had memorized every detail of the crime, and Marcus Thompson's lyrics contained information that had never been released to the public. "Turn that up," I told Detective Mike Chen, who had been playing the song on his phone. "You like hip-hop, Rodriguez? This kid's pretty good." "I like evidence," I replied, pulling out my notebook to write down the song's title and artist name. "And this might be the break we've been looking for." Back at my desk, I pulled up the complete case file on the First National Bank robbery and began comparing the details to Marcus Thompson's lyrics. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The song mentioned badges looking clean. Our investigation had determined that the robbers used fake security company credentials. The lyrics referenced "studied the layout for weeks, bank security." Footage showed the same 2 men visiting the bank multiple times in the month before the robbery, always during different shifts. Most damning of all, the song bragged about the biggest payday of my life. Our investigation had determined that exactly $1.247 million had been stolen. These weren't generic rap lyrics about hypothetical crimes. This was a detailed account of a specific robbery that matched our case in ways that couldn't possibly be coincidental. I spent the next several hours researching Marcus Thompson online. His social media presence painted a picture of a struggling rapper who had suddenly experienced a significant improvement in his lifestyle. New clothes, expensive studio sessions, dinners at high-end restaurants, all funded by income sources that didn't match his official employment at an electronics store. More importantly, the timeline was perfect. Perfect Score had been recorded and released approximately 6 weeks after the bank robbery, exactly when someone might feel confident enough about getting away with the crime to start bragging about it. "Captain," I said, walking into Captain Martinez's office with a printed copy of the song lyrics, "I think we found our bank robbers." Captain Martinez looked skeptical as I explained my theory. "You're telling me that someone confessed to $1 million bank robbery in a rap song?" "I'm telling you that Marcus Thompson included details in his lyrics that only someone with intimate knowledge of our case would know. Details that were never released to the media." I walked Captain Martinez through the evidence point by point, showing him how the song's narrative matched our investigation in dozens of specific ways. By the time I finished my presentation, his skepticism had transformed into excitement. "This is either the stupidest criminal in LA history, or the luckiest guess anyone's ever made," he said. "Either way, we need to investigate this thoroughly." The first step was obtaining a warrant to search Marcus Thompson's residence and financial records. Given the specific nature of the evidence in his song lyrics, Judge Patricia Williams had no hesitation in approving our request. Detective Rodriguez, she said as she signed the warrant, in 30 years on the bench, I've never seen a case where the suspect provided this much evidence against himself. If your theory is correct, this young man has made a very expensive mistake. The search of Marcus's apartment yielded immediate results. Hidden in a shoebox in his bedroom closet, we found $47,000 in cash, far more money than someone earning minimum wage should have been able to accumulate. More importantly, the bills were still in bank straps with serial numbers that matched currency stolen from First National Bank. Marcus Thompson, I said as we placed him under arrest, you're under arrest for armed robbery, conspiracy, and theft of federal funds. Marcus's face went white as he realized the magnitude of his situation. I want a lawyer, he said immediately. Smart choice, I replied. You're going to need a good one. During the interrogation that followed, Marcus initially maintained his innocence, claiming that his song was purely fictional and that the cash in his apartment came from music-related income. But when I played Perfect Score and began reading the lyrics aloud, pointing out each detail that matched our investigation, his confidence began to crumble. The song describes entering through the employee entrance, I said. Our investigation determined that's exactly how the robbers gained access. The song mentions a 7-minute timeline. Our analysis of the security footage shows the robbery took exactly 7 minutes and 32 seconds. The song brags about fooling bank security with fake credentials. We have witness testimony confirming that the robbers posed as security auditors. Marcus's lawyer, a public defender named Jennifer Walsh, tried to argue that the similarities were coincidental. Detective Rodriguez, she said, rap music is full of fictional narratives about criminal activity. The fact that some details happen to match a real crime doesn't prove my client's involvement. Ms. Walsh, I replied, your client didn't just get some details right. He got dozens of specific details right, including information that was never made public. The probability of that being coincidental is essentially zero. But the real breakthrough came when we arrested Tony Williams. Unlike Marcus, Tony was a career criminal who understood the legal system and the value of cooperation. When faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of a life sentence under California's 3 strikes law, Tony decided to make a deal. I'll tell you everything, Tony said during his first interrogation. But I want immunity from federal charges and a reduced sentence on the state charges. Tony's confession filled in all the remaining gaps in our investigation. He described the months of planning, the acquisition of fake credentials, the detailed surveillance of the bank, and most importantly, Marcus Thompson's eager participation in every aspect of the crime. Marcus was the one who wanted to do it, Tony told us. I presented the opportunity, but he was the one who kept pushing to move forward. He was desperate for money, and he thought this would solve all his problems. Tony also confirmed what we had already suspected about the song lyrics. I told him never to tell anyone about the robbery, Tony said. But Marcus couldn't help himself. He was so proud of what we'd done, and he wanted everyone to know how smart and tough he was. When he played that song for me, I knew we were finished. With Tony's confession and the evidence from Marcus's lyrics and apartment, the prosecution had an airtight case. District Attorney Michael Harrison decided to charge both men with armed robbery, conspiracy, and federal charges related to the theft of federally insured funds. This case represents a new category of criminal stupidity, DA Harrison said during a press conference announcing the charges. Mr. Thompson literally confessed to his crimes in a song, then distributed that confession to thousands of people online. It's unprecedented in my experience. The media coverage of the case was intense. Rapper confesses to bank robbery in song lyrics became a national news story, with legal experts and criminologists weighing in on the unprecedented nature of the evidence. This case will be studied in law schools for decades, said Professor Janet Miller from UCLA Law School. It represents a perfect example of how social media and the desire for fame can lead criminals to incriminate themselves in ways that would have been impossible in previous generations. Marcus's music career, which had seemed so promising just weeks earlier, was destroyed overnight. Apex Records immediately canceled their interest in signing him, and streaming platforms began removing his music due to the criminal investigation. We cannot be associated with an artist who uses our platform to confess to serious crimes, said a spokesperson for Spotify. Mr. Thompson's music has been removed from our service pending the resolution of his legal issues. The trial itself was almost anticlimactic. With Tony's confession, the physical evidence from Marcus's apartment, and the detailed confession contained in Perfect Score, the prosecution's case was overwhelming. Marcus's defense team tried to argue that the song lyrics were protected speech and couldn't be used as evidence, but Judge Williams ruled that the First Amendment doesn't protect confessions to crimes. Mr. Thompson chose to create and distribute a detailed account of his criminal activity, Judge Williams said during a pretrial hearing. The fact that he chose to do so in the form of a rap song doesn't grant him any special protection from the consequences of that decision. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Marcus Thompson was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, while Tony Williams received 12 years as part of his cooperation agreement. During the sentencing hearing, Marcus finally showed genuine remorse for his actions. "Your Honor," he said, "I know I made terrible decisions, and I take full responsibility for my actions. I let my desperation and pride cloud my judgment, and I hurt innocent people in the process. I'm sorry for what I did, and I'm sorry for being stupid enough to brag about it in a song." Judge Williams was not moved by Marcus's apology. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "you committed a serious violent crime that traumatized innocent bank employees and customers. But what makes your case particularly egregious is the arrogance you displayed afterward. You were so proud of your criminal success that you couldn't resist bragging about it to the world. That level of narcissism and poor judgment suggests that you pose a significant danger to society." As I watched Marcus Thompson being led away in handcuffs, I reflected on the strange turns that criminal investigations can take. In my 15 years as a detective, I had seen criminals caught by DNA evidence, surveillance footage, witness testimony, and forensic analysis. But I had never seen a case where the suspect provided such detailed evidence against himself, then distributed that evidence to thousands of people online. Marcus Thompson had achieved his dream of creating a hit song that showcased his authentic criminal experience. Unfortunately for him, that authenticity came with a price tag of 15 years in federal prison. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of social media, the importance of thinking before posting, and the reality that in the digital age, everything you create online can and will be used against you in a court of law. Perfect score had indeed been the perfect score for the prosecution team that used it to secure a conviction in one of the most straightforward criminal cases in Los Angeles history. The END warning legal notice: this story is completely fictional and was created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.